fucking do the thing.
I like it.
Cool. Let's fucking do it.
It's been a week. Good Lord.
Oh my God. How did we even survive?
I don't know.
Well,
I slept a lot. That's what I did.
well, that's cool. Yeah, I ran myself ragged trying to move, which sucked balls. But there we go. Yeah. What about the song? Let's do the song.
Oh yeah. Here are we live? We're ready.
We
Here
are.
we go.
We're like on the thing.
Well, shit, man. We're gonna open with this.
Oh my God.
Okay. No sound. Greg.
Oh
Greg,
fuck. Hang on.
try again.
Yeah.
So hey, we're rusty.
I'm telling you, man.
Rusty.
All right. So, okay, Corey. Okay, Corey. Share computer audio. Forgot that. I thought I defaulted to that when I set this up. But anyway, so much for the good cold opening with the song. Got it now?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the Hijackers in the house tonight. And they just got back from Washington, D.C. I think they got something they want to say.
Dancing this morning. We thought we'd kick the new year off right. That was the Honey Drippers, Impeach the President. Yeah, by Robert Hammond is the songwriter's name. He's actually still alive. He has another record label he runs down in North Carolina. Apparently, he's got to be in his early 80s by now. But anyway, we've written Mr. Hammond 2 letters to make sure he knows we're using the song. He hasn't hit us back yet, and it hasn't been taken down anytime we've used it. So. Thank you, Mr. Hammond, for your amazing song and recording from 1973. Yeah. Hey, Ash Gallagher is joining us this morning.
Hey, you want to turn the share off?
I should probably turn the share off thing. Man, I'm rusty. You're right. You are not wrong about that.
Hey, everybody. Hey, how you doing?
Hey. So I gotta break in before we start because Fuckface McGee just had a caps locks tweet about 14 minutes ago. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon! ! Which would have been true if he'd have just stayed in the nuclear arms deal, but you know.
Yeah.
We see how that's turned out.
Yeah, right. Everything's great. Everything's just dandy. At this point, considering what Trump has been saying and what he's doing, disregarding the fact that I think it was Ahmadinejad that was talking about wiping Israel off the map, which is never like a good thing to say out loud because the rest of the world can hear you.
But they've been consistent. They've been saying that consistently since.
Right, but so like just removing that rhetoric, which you can't really do, but like just separating that out as a thought experiment.
Unfortunately, go ahead.
No, the only rational thing to do if you're Iran, surrounded by the U.S. that basically threatens to bomb you every 5 seconds, is to get a nuclear weapon. Like it's like that's the only reasonable deterrent, because at any time that regime could potentially get wiped off the map by some fucking asshole like Trump. And I know it's more complicated than that, but like there is a rational actor quotient to this that I can't stop thinking about. Anyway, Ash, how do you feel about it? Because you know 18 million times more than I do.
Yeah, let me start by making sure everybody knows Ash Gallagher is a renowned journalist and is writing an amazing book about her time in war in the Middle East, in Iraq, in Syria, in Turkey. And we're super, super proud that she pays attention to us and joins us for our show now and then. And it seemed like a perfect day to have Ash Gallagher on to talk about all things Middle East. So please continue, Ms. Gallagher.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. It's been a minute, boys. So I'm happy to be here, and for all the people that have been so supportive. Look, it goes back to the history. There's a long history through the 20th century of dealing with Iran and the U.S.'s role in the 1979 revolution, and the Americans who were held hostage, and this sort of back and forth that's been happening for 4, almost 5 decades. And so this is a complicated space to be in the first place. But the Iran deal, however imperfect it was the one thing that was keeping Iran at bay, and that was creating the potential for a better relationship in the future. I am convinced that, to be honest with you, Iran had the potential to be a much more lucrative ally than Saudi Arabia, who pretty much throws money at a problem and ignores everything that comes out of a meeting. So we have to consider some of these things. But I want to break down as briefly as I can, and as well as I can, for those of you who are still putting some of the pieces together in what's happened with Suleimani. He is a general who is basically number 2 to a lot of the Iranian people. Now, there are going to be thousands, tens of thousands of people who are going to praise his death because he was a military commander, because he was a militia commander, because he did orchestrate the deaths and killings of many others. So he is public enemy number 1 for many people. But he is also a hero to many people. And the pictures that are coming out of Iran across the news networks are quite fascinating. In the Middle East, grief and death are treated much differently than it is in the West. In the West, we're actually kind of boring about it, and everybody sort of hides their grief. But Middle Easterners, they don't, right? There's a huge outpouring of people who typically show up, especially if there's somebody that's considered a martyr or a leader or someone who is considered a hero to many, right? Especially if they're a warrior. And this is very, very natural. And so you are seeing pictures of tens of thousands, if not millions, of Iranians who believed in this man, who felt that this man was their hero. And so one of the other problems that we now have that is a huge issue, and actually Jane Addif, who works with NPR, she tweeted this
I'm
out
linking
earlier,
that right now. Yep.
And the fact is that he was on his way to deliver a message that would diffuse tensions when he was struck, and it's being reported that President Trump asks Iraq to mediate and then strikes the guy. So the entire protocol was completely dislodged, and Iraq's response has been they've been very angry, they've been very upset, they have called for foreign soldiers to be expelled from the country, and that will more likely hit the United States than it will affect Iran. The two countries are neighbors. Iraq gets a good percentage of its food, its gas lines, from Iran, period. And so even if they were trying to keep the two countries from competing over them or keep a proxy from happening. They will always have a slightly closer relationship with Iran than they will with the United States. The United States invaded. And despite Iran-Iraq war and all of the wars passed between Iran and Iraq, at the end of the day, they have a semi-formidable relationship because the population in Iraq, especially the Shia Muslim population in Iraq, reveres a lot of the Iranian religious leadership and their political leadership. And so what President Donald Trump did was stupid. It was a distraction. I think Reza Islam posted the other day, he talked about how, war is an easy distraction in an election year. If you go back in history, you'll actually see some of that. Major military calls in the middle of an election year because war sort of keeps a leader in place because nobody wants to deal with anything else. So Pelosi is not going to be able to allow herself to get distracted by this. She needs to sort of stay on par with everything that she's doing on the impeachment, as well as be able to take on the task of demanding some sort of accountability for the fact that Congress was not consulted.
Well, let me just throw in as a way of making sure we don't despair too deeply. One thing that Nancy Pelosi, one of many things, but one thing she has proved centrally in all this is the ability to walk and chew gum at the same time, and to organize around not just the impeachment of the president of the United States, but also putting 200 plus pieces of legislation on the desk of Mitch McConnell where it goes to die. In other words, she's been very good at maintaining focus throughout this process. So I don't have any worries about that.
I would agree with you. I mean, she's shown herself incredibly tough in these circumstances, so I think we can expect her to organize it fairly well. But I think it's really, really important that people realize, and I can kind of keep going to this point. I've got an op-ed, I think, that'll probably come out in the next couple of days, where I talk about this whole thing of tribalism. There are people, and even journalists, who are vehemently against him, and there are people who are vehemently against the United States. And it's just kind of this war of words on who's the worst person and who's the bad guy and who's not the bad guy. We shouldn't be celebrating the death of this general. I don't think that this general was a good person or a good man, but for our government to say, oh, well, there was an imminent attack. Well, there was an imminent attack almost every day by he and his subordinates because this is what they did. This is what generals do. I mean, if you go to even the U.S. generals are constantly making plans about places they're going to attack and strategy, and they've been doing it in Afghanistan, which we know was a lot of BS because nobody knew what they were doing. But they've done it in Iraq, they do it in Syria. So even our own generals are doing this on a regular basis. So to say that they stop something.
Yeah, I want to break in real quick. Because when Pompeo was pressed on the imminent situation, he basically said it was irrelevant. Like the idea that there was an imminent attack is now completely and totally broken. Never mind that it looks like he was literally in Iraq trying to lower tensions with Saudi Arabia. Like and because we never trust anything the administration says because we've been trained properly not to, we automatically assume that it was bullshit. But it is like that until they can prove. Intensely prove and have third parties corroborate it. This is all bullshit. Every scrap of it is dog shit. It's literally just trying to not be to change the focus away from impeachment or something worse.
Here's the thing that what we've learned. One of the many things that we've learned that is important is they're not trying to convince you and I, Corey. They're only trying to convince the people that are already in the bag for President Donald Trump. Like the only people they worry about whether they believe that imminent threat bullshit are people that have and will vote for Donald J. Trump. And I'm okay with that because that's not going to win the election.
I think
that's not enough people. Like I was surprised at the amount of public backlash posting about people worry, is there going to be a draft? Are my kids in danger? Like I never heard that before from nearly as large a segment of my friends list, during either of the prior Iraq wars. So I feel like maybe the American people are moving away from this idea that we can bomb our way to peace.
I hope so. And I mean, that, if we're going to be tired of it, now's a really, really good time. Is that the thing that really struck me, and Ash, you kind of brought this up. There was one of the generals was on MSNBC and a lot of other people that everybody wants to start with. He was a really, really bad guy. He had the blood of like 600 Americans on his hand. I keep thinking, okay, well, what if you flip it, right? Like take any general that goes into that space and up arms militias, which is what we do, right? Like it's like
of course we do.
Copying the CIA's playbook from the last 50 years, right? Like
absolutely.
Switch sides. That's literally all this guy was doing, maybe with a religious component. And yes, he's like bombing people. He's doing, irregular warfare or whatever. We're literally arming people to do that in Syria and Iraq and Kurdistan right now. Like we do that all the time. So take any single general in the US Army. They've got way more than 600 fucking people's deaths on their hands. I mean, look, one of the airstrikes that I covered in Iraq were over 200, some said 300 people right there. That was one airstrike in the middle of, I don't know, March or April of 2017 during the Battle for Mosul. And that was an American plane. So as far as I'm concerned, one airstrike is what, half of what of what we're talking about with this guy? Now, again, anyone who commits a war crime, I'd love to see them dragged in front of the ICC court and try them. Yes.
So for me, this goes to a much, much bigger issue. Like you said before, you said the statement, we can't bomb our way to peace. This is not how it goes. This is not how it works. If we're going to any form of diplomacy, and I know there are going to be people who are going to say that I sound a little too like Marianne Williamson a little bit here, but here's the thing. We have to at least appreciate what this idea of sort of this tribal mentality is, and that the only way to stop this is to say, okay, we've got to reach in for some sense and start talking. Because here's the thing, Iraq wants us out, so we need to start having conversations with Iraq. We need to start having conversations with Iran. We need to say, hey, we're not going to attack you, but we'll meet at the table. All right, let's everybody go to Dubai or whatever and actually meet at the table. But here's the other thing too, is that I think I also believe that Saudi helps write the script on this kind of stuff. About a month ago, back in December, in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, there was a Muslim summit, Camel Summit. Okay, every major Muslim country was invited.
Those are fairly regular, are they not?
Malaysia, I think, was they've been trying to make this one happen for a while. So this was sort of a bigger deal for them. Mm-hmm. But what was interesting about this is that they extended personal invitations to all these different countries because they wanted to start dealing with economic forward movement. How do we start creating development as Muslim countries together? Rather than constantly relying on the West, how can we start sort of work together better? So this was about, and this included Iraq, this included Iran, this included everybody. And Iran attended, Sunni Muslim majority Turkey attended, which was kind of interesting to see those two. Saudi Arabia refused, and as soon as Saudi Arabia refused, Indonesia and Pakistan both pulled out. And now there's some tension. There's even more tension because they don't want to sit in the same room with Iran. So you've got the Saudis, who I think are definitely trying to write a script as far as being in control in the Middle East. And with Israel, the problem becomes that Saudi becomes the convenient ally to them, right? The Saudis and Israel don't really get along that great. It's the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Right.
So right now they're for the same cause, and that is anti-Iran. And this propaganda, we know that Trump is someone who succumbs very quickly to propaganda and then perpetuates it himself. I mean, he tweets out conspiracy theories all the time. And so this is a guy who easily buys into it if he thinks he can somehow benefit. And I am very curious about this contractor. I haven't been able to find as much information as I would like about the contractor who was killed, who apparently was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back before this attack. This contractor, who he was or what company he was, I have not been able to find that. I don't know if you guys have, but I've been a little scarce on that information because I'm wondering what company was he with?
Well,
this was enough of a threat for Trump to go forward.
Let me add a bit
or an excuse. Like that's ultimately all Trump has been looking for is any excuse. Right?
Let me add a bit of depth to this mystery. I actually there's two people that I don't talk about on the show because they're not excited about about knowing that we talk, that we talk about the public knowing that we talk about these things. But one of them is a former special forces officer, and the other one, it works currently in a company that employs a great many contractors that are working in the theater that we're talking about. And both of those people tell me they're not at all convinced there actually was a contractor. the person that works for the company that manages a whole lot of people, they have extraction teams. Their company is big enough that they have extraction teams. So if somebody's in danger, they go and they get them. And they had no, she was hearing nothing from that part of the building. Like they weren't saying, hey, we're pulling our people back, or we're, until this thing happened with Suleimani, they were not on any sense, in any sense on high alert. So usually when someone else's people get jacked, they get very active. If someone from, say Shell Oil Company gets kidnapped, they go on a state of high alert to make sure all their people are protected to the best effect possible. And she said they weren't really moving in that direction before the Suleimani bombing. So
I believe that.
That's curious to me, that maybe this is a fictional contractor, or a rumor of a contractor, or a contractor got killed in some other way, and how it was spun to the president was, they killed one of our people, and that was maybe what the trigger moment for him and for Pompeo to move on this. So that's a bit conspiracy theory-ish, but it wouldn't surprise me that the president acted in a way that is not informed by proof of any kind.
That's true. So the embassy in Baghdad released a statement.
Okay.
Basically just saying we appreciate that 27 UN nations spoke out against the December 31st Iran orchestrated attack on the U.S. embassy. They clearly recognize the enforcement of the host country's obligations under the Vienna Convention, but their comments stand in stark contrast to the UN Security Council's silence due to two permanent members, Russia and China, not allowing the statement to proceed. Indeed, not allowing the UN Security Council to issue the most basic statements, underscoring the unavoidability of diplomatic and consular premises, once again calls the Council's credibility into question. As we've demonstrated, we will not tolerate attacks on U.S. personnel facilities. We will respond decisively to protect our interests, citizens, and allies. This is allegedly coming from the embassy that sits in Baghdad.
You guys want to hear something really fucked up? Because
this is the Hezbollah statement.
No,
that's pretty amazing.
I commented on that before, just in case we can go back to that. So Nasrallah, who is apparently the head of Hezbollah, I want to be very clear. We don't mean the American people. All across the region, there are American citizens, traders, journalists, engineers, and doctors. They cannot be touched. Any harm to U.S. civilians will only serve Trump's agenda. And that motherfucker's right.
That's
right?
amazing
to me.
It's
just so the
we're
leader
living
of Hezbollah,
in a world where it seems like we're living in a world
right.
like Hezbollah and the Iraqi parliament and the Iranian government are more believable and sincere than our government in this moment.
Well, here's the other thing: the stakes in Lebanon for Hezbollah are very high, actually.
Right.
And that is because they are very much part of the fabric of the society and trying to retain some sort of political control within the Lebanese society, which has been plagued by protests in the streets, trying to get rid of its government and start over. So as a result, it's really important for them to be as clear as possible, especially because there's a lot of Lebanese Americans, less people who probably hold dual passports in the country and so forth, that they have to, he is actually having to make a statement like this for the sake of the fact that if they want to remain, have some sense of, civility among their own people, because the Lebanese really love the Americans. The Americans provide for the Lebanese military, that he's got to be as clear as possible. And I do actually think that's important. It's a stark contrast. Look, President Trump threatened to hit cultural sites, which is a war crime.
That's a war crime.
Nuts.
Yep, that is a war crime, and I'm going to put the link in that you sent me about that.
And that's the second after he did that is when Iran said, "Hey, all the brakes are off on uranium enrichment." And honestly, why wouldn't they be? Right. Like that. If you're a rational actor who's just been threatened with all that, and again, there's been a shadow war going back and forth. It's not like there hasn't been a death on both sides. Everybody's got blood on their hands. Welcome to war. It fucking sucks, right? But this escalation is planned. Okay, so if I could take a few minutes, there's something super strange, and the idea, and I tweeted about this. Correlation isn't causation. Giant butt. Not like giant butt. Like I like big butts and I cannot lie. But
well, some other brother might deny.
I mean, they might. Sorry, that just got weird. So this little outfit found a whistleblower in Germany and found out that all of Trump's Deutsche Bank loans were underwritten by Russian state-owned banks, right? Which is what we had assumed before. But let me give you a little timeline.
BT Bank, we talked about that a year ago, actually.
Yep. But it's like it literally is confirmed that that it comes straight from the Russian government-owned banks. So anyway, so Friday we notified Deutsche Bank about our piece. Sunday, Trump and Putin have a mysterious phone call. Remember that? Wednesday, we tell Deutsche Bank we are publishing Friday. Wednesday, Trump decides to kill Soleimani. Thursday, Soleimani assassinated. Friday, we are cyber attacked.
Wow.
And it's like they got receipts all through the article. I'll send send links of it. And again, all of this will come down to Panama Papers, Russian money laundering all day, right? Yeah. Like I could never, and I will never forget that the vast majority of overseas condos that are in Trump Towers are being sold to nameless corporations. Right?
Well, and a lot of them, a lot of Russians,
right. Well, that's how you launder money.
Panama City, yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, now we're just gonna start a war because he's gonna get caught.
That's crazy.
Well, I'm frankly just not surprised.
Right? I mean, that's the sad part about it.
Like, how can I be surprised?
Right, exactly.
Like, I mean, that's the thing. It's like I'm racking my brain for some level of shock. I'm like, but no.
Well, and I think, and like when I think about how this affects, us domestically, number one, we are not in danger of Iranian terrorists in small sleeper cells waking up and starting to bomb shit in America. I think that's very unlikely. I think vulnerable Americans the world over should be mindful of their own security right now. But something that happened this weekend that to me smacks of how serious this is. Iranian American citizens were detained for between 8 and 12 hours at the Canadian border. They were at an Iranian cultural festival and concert in Vancouver, and hundreds of them were apparently detained at the Canadian border for hours in question. We're detaining American citizens now without charge to question them about their political allegiance. That's internment camp road. Yeah. That's where that goes. And I'm really I'm terrified by that. But the other thing that I think is important about this is there's a solve for this. And the solve is that we make Donald Trump no longer the president of the fucking United States.
Exactly.
That's we can't, no amount of us shaming or calling out or pointing to or neon lighting what he's doing and its apparent motives and operations. None of that is going to change his path. None of that is going to change the path of the people that are in his pocket. That would be Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence, the usual suspects that we talk about.
But I think we have to go beyond just the president. I think that's the thing too, is that what we've done is we've isolated and said, and this is where I think we have to be careful, just I think in the overall conversation, and that is we say, okay, if we get rid of Trump, we'll get rid of all our troubles, we put somebody new and it'll fix it. No, we have some cultural problems as it concerns our military. And don't get me wrong, I support our men and women in uniform who have done some incredible things, and I have some very good relationships with some military guys. I was talking to one of them the other day. He was the media guy when I was in Erbil, and we loved working together because the communication was great. He was one of the better media guys that I worked with, and I appreciate everything that they do. That said, it doesn't mean the orders from the top are okay. And I think that it's right and it's appropriate for us to question our military protocol. And it's right and it's okay for us to question how our military functions in the world. And it's right and it's okay to voice, telling our military that they need to take a step to perhaps disobey their commander-in-chief when it is globally unlawful. I think that we have to have a culture that is not, we have become a culture that is as warlike as the ones we point fingers at.
Yeah.
Yep,
and the only way to solve that is to shift the culture around being able to hold our military accountable as well.
Okay, so let me clarify what I said, because I want to make sure that we understand that I don't have any doubt that there have consistently and always been people in our military and in our other intelligence structures and in our other foreign action structures that want to be more aggressive in our foreign policy than we are. So I've always seen the president and, maybe the heads of these agencies as sort of the brakes, right? Like we said, like what we were saying about Suleimani, our generals, our command staffs are always planning operations, contingency operations, things that we might do, and a lot of those are crazy aggressive. A lot of those would make a political situation worse. And what's always happened before is the president has been the person that said, yeah, thank you for that option, but that's not how we're going to proceed. So my feeling on this is this president is susceptible to being the most aggressive and repugnant actor in any situation. And that's proved out by not just his presidency, but by his entire adult life. And so when I say that about removing him, what I mean is replacing him with someone that isn't a rubber stamp for the worst impulses of planners and strategists. Right. I sat down and watched, I watched a documentary about Mike Nichols yesterday, and then I sat down and watched Charlie Wilson's War again about Congressman Charlie Wilson.
Yeah.
Who, that movie, the more I watch that movie, the more I see where we are now. You can see a lot of the shaping of that in what we did for Afghani rebels against the Russians. And now we've sort of become again what we were in the Vietnam era, which was the giant provider of death among civilian populations to an entire region of the world. And we seem immune to feeling shame about that as a country, as a people. And I'm worried about that. I really am worried. Like the amount of, for all the, are my kids in danger? Is there going to be a draft that I heard? I am worried about the other reaction, which is good. Turn it into a glass parking lot. Hey, when we killed Suleimani, we set in motion a thing that is absolutely going to lead to lots of civilian deaths. And a lot of those civilians are going to be Americans that are working and living abroad. And
I actually saw someone tweet this today, and I do want to bring it up because I think it's worthwhile. And that is the fact that, there is a draft. We call it poverty.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
And it was a veteran who had actually I have to go back and find the tweet. I think Sean, what's his name, Corey? Sean, he retweeted it.
King?
I will find it. Yeah, Sean King. He tweeted it out as somebody else. But basically, I mean, that's I think it's a really important point in the sense that we don't have an official draft that calls them up and sends them a letter, right? Like they did with Vietnam. But the society has grown, particularly since the 80s, on a trajectory of rich and poor, which is something we're fighting in these elections right now, which is a big part of the debate conversation, right? It's a big part of Sanders and Warren's campaigns. And what has happened is your lower class, your poor class, your poverty class, they are the ones who are going to have the most close-knit connections with the military because their children have all gone in it because nobody has any money to survive, nobody has money to go to school, nobody has housing, and
opportunities
honestly,
of any
the military
kind.
Opportunity completely gets that. So what ends up happening is we put far more people in danger and sort of give them this like, oh yeah, we're going to give you all of these things, and don't actually think about the consequences of that when something like this happens. Because maybe I'm also just frustrated with the fact that we have almost 700 bases worldwide, more than any other country in the world.
Yep.
And the fact is that we have set ourselves up as a country that claims to pride itself on how much opportunity and live in some sort of American dream, but actually what it's doing is it's building a military force that is carrying out the wars of the rich.
Yep. Yeah. I saw somebody else's thread yesterday. One of the commenters who was a Trump supporter, supportive of this action, said, well, Trump's, the president that won't allow us to be bullied. I'm like, bullied? Snowflake, where do you live? You live in a country, as Ash just said, has 700 something military bases around the world, larger Navy than the next 12 countries combined. How do you feel bullied in this situation? The same thing I hear from religious fundamentalists, oh, we're being persecuted. You're the majority in this country. Do you get kicked off a bus for wearing your crucifix outside your shirt? No, you don't. You're not being persecuted. You are the majority. So that perception that we're some sort of bullied minority.
It's trained. Watch Fox News for an hour.
It's crazy.
Like that victimhood, that professional victimhood is trained by Fox News.
It's a good word for it.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna percolate into everything. Like, oh my goodness, why are they attacking us when they have absolutely no fucking idea how we killed over 1 million or 2 million people in Iraq, or because we actually went in and destabilized that. They have no concept of that at all. And then generals on our side, right? Generals going on MSNBC talking about this guy's like a really, really bad dude, because he helped stand up militias that killed some of our troops. And yeah, that's bad. But the war that we fucking started, that none of our troops would have been there unless Bush had fucking lied us into Iraq in the first place for oil.
Well, it becomes a tit for tat, right? It becomes
of course it does,
your bad
right?
guy versus my bad guy versus that bad guy versus your good guy. And, and it just goes into a cycle like this. And there isn't any change, and there isn't a bigger or higher conversation about how to create better diplomacy and justice for the sake of not doing all of this stuff. But that's the thing. Unfortunately, war makes money.
Oh yeah, did you see?
And it makes for the ultimate political distraction.
Yeah, the stocks of Raytheon and General, several of the large companies went, skyrocketed.
And a bunch of people made very, very specific high leveraged bets before stuff going through. And Trump told everyone at Mar-a-Lago before he was going to do it like that.
And we've seen him do that before. We've 100%. Seen him enrich people before.
They should be arrested for insider trading. Like Martha Stewart should be running a campaign, another campaign to get seriously, everybody at Mar-a-Lago. They should be able to. The feds should be able to track that back and have people literally arrested for insider trading.
Yeah, thank God we have an independent Justice Department and Attorney General who would get right on that.
Attorney General? Oh, we have one? You're certain?
That's sarcasm. Yeah. In the same way that I'm sure we can depend on our Kurdish and Syrian allies to help us out in this moment of crisis in the Middle East.
Yeah, I'm sure
that's the thing is Iraq cannot turn it. It can't afford to turn into Syria. Iraq cannot afford to turn into Syria. But here's the problem. It might turn into, Iraq has actually, despite the fact that we invaded them, we're doing a pretty damn good job having some formidable relationship with them through the course of the fact that we train their soldiers, we train their special forces to be able to fight Daesh on the same side, and we worked with some of the popular mobilization forces in Iraq to fight Daesh. We were all on the same side, so they can't afford to turn into another Syria. Iraq had a chance for a sense of security that could be gone now.
How do you think they avoid that, Ash?
Well, I don't blame Iraq for wanting the troops out. I don't know that it's going to send the U.S. troops out. I think what this is going to do is it's going to draw up some serious negotiations. At least that's what Iraq is hoping for. I don't think Iraq actually expects American troops to leave. But I do think that it's going to be their way of maybe trying to force them at the table. I don't know if there's other international players or Europe. It's going to take some European players, I think, that are going to have to step in and help enforce it. And it may actually take Iraq creating a better relationship with another European power. They may need to look to one of the other European countries and try and build a bigger relationship to kind of put that pressure on the United States. I kind of think that Trump will be tempted to gaslight the situation and say, "Oh well, look, I told you I was going to get our troops out."
Try and flip it. Yeah, of course he will.
I think he would try and flip it.
Right. No, this is all part of my Jesus fucking plan.
Right. So I think that there's a few things that could play out at the end of the day. I don't entirely know. Somehow, I'm not expecting World War III. I do expect that there may be attacks from the Hashad that we will see across potentially Syria, Iraq, or Lebanon. I don't think that we should shut out that at all. How the U.S. is going to respond further, or what negotiations come to the table in Baghdad, I'm not entirely sure. But my theory is that the U.S. isn't just going to up and leave, and so maybe the hope under the table is that they can put enough pressure somehow on the international community or on the U.S. to adhere. Because they did say that the U.S. breached. Now, one of the things that I learned about airstrikes in Iraq was the fact that there is meant to be a protocol. I mean, I had a general, who laid out the whole thing for me. And I'll see if I can find the article where I talk a little bit about it. But there's like 4 or 5 steps that they're supposed to go through. And that could take anywhere from 5 minutes to a couple of hours, depending on whether or not the U.S. asks permission to strike or whether the Iraqis come to them and ask them to strike. But either way, there's a protocol that is meant. Does it mean the U.S. is followed all the time? No, I can certainly tell you during Mosul that didn't necessarily happen, but there is meant to be. And this clearly seems to violate that. And Iraq is sitting here saying they breached it, and we've got a drone attack that wasn't supposed to be there. So
that's always that friction between
long-winded answer. I don't know.
No. That checks out because of that constant ongoing friction between ground operations troops and air support or artillery troops, where we need our artillery right now. So the protocols are in place to make sure that I, the ground commander, request a strike on a point on the ground, and I do everything I can to make sure that point on the ground needs to be hit, deserves to be hit, isn't a place where civilians are, and that goes up a chain of command and back down to me, getting the authorized airstrike. So that's an old kind of protocol, and it's gotten honed and sharper over time. But when someone is working outside that protocol, that this feels like that to me. This feels like this was a thing that just fell out of the sky on them. And the whole idea that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, did not notify the Gang of Eight in Congress that this was coming, did not have any conversations with anybody outside the Situation Room about it, certainly didn't discuss it with the Iraqis. This is all.
But we have a habit of this. We have a habit. Look. Don't get me wrong. I think that Osama bin Laden's death is the justice that was done. But we did go into Pakistan without them knowing.
Right.
We make a habit of going into these places without telling the host country, regardless of what our relationship is, and doing whatever the hell we want, and then we leave.
Yeah.
I had a British friend of mine. He's a former special forces and security guy. And he said Americans are terrible imperialists. We are.
Yeah,
we go in, strike, make up a fuss, and then walk away.
We're the empire.
What's to keep this president from doing this in Mexico? What's to keep the president from drone striking some drug lord in Mexico who happens to be an elected member of the Mexican governmental system, right?
Which keeps me screaming why we aren't. We shouldn't just protest anti-war. But the fact that our money goes toward these weapons of war rather than going investment in these countries, the truth is, if we invested in these countries and helping rebuild what we've destroyed, we'd actually build better relationships, have more incredible opportunities for resources to come our way. I mean, if there was a concern, it would be less of a concern because we wouldn't have to fight for it. We'd actually make better deals. Yep. The point is that we actually invested in the rebuilding, but they don't see that. It's instant gratification. Instant gratification
because we're still bombing their weddings.
Money.
Right.
Yeah.
That's. So Trump just tweets out, it was yesterday, about we spent $2 trillion on fucking new tanks because we do tank battles all the time, and like new weapons and all this crazy shit. Where the Chinese have literally invested $1 trillion in the Belt and Road Initiative that will make them within 5 to 10 years the dominant player on the world stage. Period. Right. And we could have done that 6 times. 6 times, but instead we're fucking murdering innocent people.
China has done this smarter. Now, I'm not saying that China is necessarily the good guys.
Oh no! They've got 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps. But I'm saying
smarter. They're 10 times smarter.
100%, and they're killing less people right now than we are. That's a fucking fact.
They're building. In fact, in Sri Lanka, for example, they wanted to build part of their Belt and Road is a maritime line, and so they basically came in and bought a port in Sri Lanka. They now own that port. They bought ports. They bought a port. They now own it because Sri Lanka will never be able to pay that loan back. So now they own that port. Now, this is terrible for Sri Lanka, but it is smart because here's the thing. It still provides jobs. It's an economic investment. And on some level, a few countries will actually benefit on some level. Again, I have seen areas of Eastern Asia where China has invested in it. It's not great, but here's the thing. They have control because they offer economic investment rather than war.
Right. Well, some African countries where that experimental mode first started, like Zimbabwe, which I keep tabs on because I lived in that region. Zimbabwe was at one time, when it was Rhodesia, was the breadbasket of Africa, was what it was called, because it provided wheat all the way up and down the continent from Cairo to the Cape. And the minute the ruling government changed, when the people who knew agricultural science were purged, and essentially because they were white. This is one of the lessons that Nelson Mandela learned. What they couldn't do in South Africa was that same thing. Like since the white colonial governments and ownership systems had never trained Black Africans to be railway engineers or agricultural scientists or doctors or architects, when all those people had to flee the country and leave their assets behind, they lost a generation of education in the things that kept those farms working. And so their economy naturally collapsed. And so the lesson for Nelson Mandela was, no, we can't afford to be without people who know how to run those things until we can train up enough people to, to take over those jobs. But the point I'm making is China stepped in at some point in the early 90s and said, hey, we want to help you out. We want to send agricultural scientists and blah, blah, blah. And so a great amount of the wheat and corn farming that was done in Zimbabwe turned over to tobacco, and all of that tobacco is exported to China. Right. So this blueprint for them, economically, creating jobs and an economic system for workers, but exporting the profits from that it's not a new thing, but they've gotten better. Now they're just buying whole ports. That's crazy.
But I mean, that's the other part of it is that
Zimbabwe for pocket change if they decided to do that in the 90s. The whole country.
Well, I think the other part of it too is that the Brits essentially did the same. Look, when they went and took over the world, they invested in the country and they grew it. Now, I'm not pro-colonialism. I'm not pro-imperialism whatsoever. I'm actually anti those things, and I think that there needs to be a far more reflection here around that. However, in understanding sort of the reality of the situation, war is not actually making friends. War just kind of keeps people in poverty, keeps things poor. It doesn't give us a chance nobody gets out of it. I think I posted, you guys may have seen the article I posted, I don't know, about a week ago. And it was a really good article slate about the fact that it's more expensive to be poor. It's more expensive to be in poverty because there's always that one or two things or those nuances that just keep you in it because you just barely have enough as it is to go month to month. And then you need this one extra thing, dental, your car gets towed, whatever the case may be. And it just kind of keeps you down. And the thing is war on an international level is the exact same thing. The more you can keep people in poverty, especially if you're on the wealthier side, the more you gain enough power. But the problem is that more and more people suffer, and more people create tribes, and more war continues, and more bloodshed, and more violent. I mean, in the end, it's just all connected. It's just all fucking connected.
Yeah.
At the end,
and
that's where we are.
And to keep this in mind also that when you are a country that has deep poverty and the inability to provide, China is a good example of a country that raised themselves from that individual poverty. And not to say there aren't poor people in China, there absolutely are. But as a government, they've managed to be able to finance bootstrap themselves into being a world power. But for smaller countries like Iran, like Iraq, like many other countries we've been in conflict with, they can't go toe to toe with us in that big multi-billion-dollar military systems kind of way. So the warfare that they've been able to pursue against us is asymmetrical. It's what we would call acts of terrorism. It's bombing us on our own soil in a limited way to be able to have an impact and make a statement about their existence and their need. This is not in any way, this is not me saying that 9/11 was okay, but
No,
9/11 was inevitable because of how we had acted in the region for the 30 or 40 years leading up. But
remember how many of them were from which country?
Yeah.
The majority of them were from Saudi, our buddies.
So you think
none of them were Iranian?
Right. So but do you think that means that was like a cynical manipulation of poor people in that region by the Saudis? Like that. How were those guys vulnerable? How were those men who actually did the deed vulnerable? What made them vulnerable?
I mean, look, I can't imagine all of those guys were from necessarily wealthy families, but a lot of them had been radicalized in places like Pakistan and other places where we had a huge effort. And here's the other thing too: we have a habit since we kind of created Osama bin Laden too. Got to go back to the 80s. Got to go back to Afghanistan. Got to go back to Cold War, right? So when you begin to actually look at the history, we create some of these rebel groups and then we ditch them, and then we invade their countries and then we ditch it, And Afghanistan and Pakistan have long been, on the docket because they were part of our sort of competition with Russia to have, during the Cold War.
Right.
So it begins there, and you have thousands of people in poverty, and then you create an ideology about who is public enemy number one, who's the big bad wolf, right? And it's easy to pick the United States, or it's easy to pick, whoever it is. For the United States, it's easy to pick this general from Iran. You pick one bad guy, and you isolate them into being the ultra villain, and you try to create yourself the ultra hero. And in a way, I think that's what these 19 guys were essentially doing. What they did with the terrorist act, what they did was wrong. What they did was something that we essentially took our own justice for, I guess, on some level, whether or not you would really call that justice. But what we also did is we actually made it worse in a really big way. Because so much fear has been created of the other, of Muslims, right? We took their religion because they used their religion to create terrorist acts, and therefore we made all of the religion bad. Because it's so easy to jump into a tribal mindset. It's so easy to jump into, okay, who's a little bit more like me? And how do I create, this goes back to sort of, human condition theories that I kind of talk about all the time. Look, all of life is our wanting to control the narrative and how we sort of manage our power within it. I don't want to feel out of control. I want to feel safe. So how do I control it? How do I gain some sort of power? And as on an individual level, we tell ourselves stories in our own head, and then we try to get a few people who can be on our side. And that might create the tribe or the society or the city or the nation, and it just sort of expands that way. And so I don't think that these guys were any different in that situation. But then we have this fight against Al-Qaeda. We continue to make Afghanistan poor. We're up against the Taliban. We invade Iraq to finish some war from the 90s. I don't know. And then we dismantle Iraq entirely, no matter how bad Saddam Hussein was. And then we have Abu Ghraib. And Abu Ghraib helps produce Baghdadi. And Baghdadi produces ISIS. And so you see what I'm saying? So to me, it becomes part, and this isn't about despair, this is about recognizing what we do so
Right.
that we can shift what we do, so that we can say, you know what, there has to be a sense of humility in diplomacy. Diplomacy actually requires a sense of humility. Saying, you know what, I don't have the answers and I don't want to, so let's talk. You would do that with your partner. So why
Right.
wouldn't we do that with two countries? Have enough humility to say, we don't want to fight, we don't want more bloodlust, we don't want more, we don't want that. How do we create a better deal? How do we stay at peace? The Iran deal initially did that for us.
Yeah. To torture your analogy, in an unhealthy or abusive relationship, one partner doesn't want to do that. One partner wants to fight. One partner wants to dominate. And we are the abusive partner in this analogy.
Right.
Because we don't seem to
And
want
so
to
then that
negotiate.
person feels backed up against a wall. So
Right.
they have either two options. They either continue to take it, they fight back, or they find other players who will defend them.
Yep. Wow, this is such a happy talk.
It's real talk. Hashtag real talk, guys.
Yep.
That's why you guys bring me on. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Well, first of all, you're like 1,000 times more knowledgeable about the intricacy of what I think it was Maria in the thread called the arterial structure of that world is very complex.
Yeah.
And you know it much, much better than we do. To us, we think of, I tend to think of national borders, right? I think of Syria as one thing and Iraq as another and Iran as another, but that's not strictly true. Like, there is such a mixture of beliefs and ideologies and motivations within each of those geographical countries that it makes it just far more complicated. I caught myself wondering this morning, I don't know when we talked briefly about Sri Lanka, and I know that there are massive Muslim populations in South Asia, but I don't know, do they have the same Sunni versus Shia kind of thing going on, or is that only in that Mid East region? So we have more questions than answers, and why we have you on is because you are very good at sorting out some of the answers for us. So we're super, super grateful.
Well, I think when it comes to, for example, Southeast Asia, there is a Muslim population. Malaysia has a very lucrative Muslim population that is mostly Sunni. I've been kind of interested to sort of check out what the Iranian influence is like. But in Thailand, it's mostly Buddhist, although there is a Muslim population. Indonesia is Sunni, which Sunni is Saudi, and Shia, Shia would be Iranian influence. A lot of the Saudi sort of influence comes into Asia. You also have a lot of Asians who convert to Islam, who then, because of their poor nations, they'll go to Saudi to actually work. So
Right.
they'll work in the UAE or Saudi Arabia because these are very wealthy countries that'll bring people in to be taxi drivers. And
It's
maids
the
and
same
things like
the
that.
same draw for Palestinians and even African Muslims, right? That they go where the money is because that's where the employment is.
I mean, a lot of that would probably be true, but the Saudis, like, so Sunnis are sort of the majority. So think in terms of Catholics and Protestants. Okay, so
Sure.
think in terms of Saudis kind of being Catholics or Shia being Protestants. The Sunni Islam has more people numbered across the globe as far as its practice than do the Shia. So the Shia are technically a minority faction or denomination. For those of you who have sort of the American Christian system, they're the minority denomination of Islam. Unfortunately, with Saudi Arabia, what is wrong with Saudi Arabia is that there is a faction called Wahhabism, and this is a more extreme version of Sunni, because even Sufism, which is kind of the hippie Islam,
Yes.
even that's considered kind of Sunni. So Wahhabism is like a more extreme, strict view. Again, within Christianity, look at how many denominations have broken out.
Right.
Islam has very much a very similar thing, but you have Sunnis tend to be a majority. In Syria, the issue was you had a minority government, the Alawite, which it leans in towards Shia. They were governing a majority Sunni nation. The Sunnis did not feel represented and began to protest. But the Syrian government protects Christians and all factions of Shia Islam under the and they were a minority in Syria.
Okay. Well, an hour with Ash Gallagher is always enlightening, if not happy making.
Yeah.
You know.
I hope that some of the information that I put out there.
No, it's
super helpful. Super
it's
helpful.
so important because like we could sort of do like a quick run, because obviously we would try to pay attention to all this. We can sort of get people up to date on whatever details we can, right? I think
we can on what the news media is telling us,
right? But the deeper knowledge on what it's actually like there, and the historical context is something that you're probably not going to get necessarily anywhere else. So thank you so much for just being part of our fam. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate all of you guys. You guys have been incredibly supportive, and to be honest, it's interesting how much I've unpacked, even just sort of writing through this book, because it's been a journey of sort of learning and having to sort of dive deep into not just the history, but understanding how it all connects. Because to be honest with you, I actually think we make it way more complicated than it needs to be, which is why, Greg, we were talking a minute ago, we were talking about the domestic violence situation. Really, if you start with that, you can kind of just build off of that as far as the global geopolitics in a way. We make it far more complicated than it needs to be as it concerns relationship.
Right. Yeah, I always like when I lived in Canada, one of the observations that I came to was, I make gentle fun of Canada. Yes, they'll go to war with us, but they need to hitch a ride. We have to transport them to the war zone. But the thing is, if you live next door to the guy that owned 27 rifles and 4,000 boxes of hand grenades, you'd kind of want to stay friendly with that guy. You don't want that guy pissed off at you because it'd blow up your fucking house. So in a way, Canada's sort of locked in with us to whatever we do because they don't want to, piss off the crazy Trump supporting neighbor next door.
Yeah.
So geopolitically, we are the scary bad neighbor. We're the scary volatile guy on your block who someday is going to snap and kill some people. That's just who we are, and it's just sad to me that we don't have to be that. We leaned away from that for a while, and it's sad to me to see us leaning back into it politically. Two things I want to make sure I mention. Mike Silvestri just posted in here that Julián Castro has announced endorsed Elizabeth Warren. Good job, Julián. I think that's I'd have to call that an unsurprising endorsement because he a lot of the same views, a lot of the same ideas. So that's good. And Dave Myers made a comment about Corey now has the trimmed beard and short hair, and he's now Miami Corey. Next thing you know, it'll be pastel sports coats and boat shoes, and he'll be driving around listening to Glenn Fry's "You Belong to the City" and living on a boat with an alligator named Elvis. That's where this is
fucking
all
hope
going.
so. That sounds all right to me. That sounds great. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I've been really enjoying. Corey's been posting pictures of the dogs on the beach, and Rhodey posted one yesterday. Rhodey looking off into the distance wistfully. When the dog eats her philosophy homework kind of look is where I went with that. So
yeah, it's good stuff. So okay, I do want to let's maybe throw this down here in the bottom. I'm gonna set up an event for it, but if you're not subscribed, we are doing the move over to YouTube, albeit slowly. I'm gonna post a replay of this there for anyone that wants to get it. There's a lot of people on Twitter that just refuse to come to Facebook to watch with us, so that's kind of why we're doing that.
Okay.
But I'm gonna be doing the sunrise from there tomorrow. So if anybody wants to catch me, they're gonna have to be on YouTube to get it. So you want to subscribe to the hashtag coffee channel.
So wait, we're gonna do our Wednesday show from YouTube. Is that what you?
I think we've been talking about doing it Fridays.
The Friday
right?
show.
I think we should do at least we were gonna do a month of Fridays and did not do that.
Right.
So let's maybe keep it the next 2 Fridays, say, and then we'll add Wednesday, and then over a month, and then
okay,
Corey.
Okay, Corey.
Okay, Greg. Okay.
Yeah, make sure you guys send me, because I'm actually starting to expand on YouTube as well. I'll be very, very slow, but yeah, I've got a few videos up, and I'll keep posting more. I think tomorrow I need to kind of shoot one a little bit and talk about some stuff. So for people who are interested in that, and also for anybody, I will just kind of throw out there. I've decided to go ahead and throw out another new chapter out there for anybody who donates. That's actually going to talk about some of the concepts that I mentioned tonight, just around tribalism and stuff like that. I think it's chapter 3 in my book. And so I'll send that to anybody who is new, who donates, and for all the other donors next week.
Yeah, I was not out in front of this, but I'm pulling up your webpage donate link right now to make sure that
Cool.
I've got the main page. Where is it in here on the page?
It's ashgallagher.com/book. But if you go up to projects, you'll find book.
Okay. Book. Okay, got it. Yep,
But,
there it is.
yeah, and then anybody who just has questions or just wants to, feel free, and I will definitely get back to you. And I probably have an op-ed coming out the next couple of days on Tier Trouble English, so I will make sure that gets posted
Nice.
on my page as well. So
You're moving in some
yeah.
heady circles, friend.
Getting after it. Well, and if you want to come back Wednesday or Friday, let us know, and we'll have you back, because chances are the Middle East will not be solved by then, as it turns out.
No, there will probably be some updates. So I'll keep in touch with you guys, and maybe one of those days I'll hop on with you guys again, and we'll regale some new stuff that's going on.
All right.
Sounds
you
good.
know what? And Donna Arbogast brings up the only thing she doesn't like about YouTube is it doesn't give her the instant notifications when you're on. Maybe there is if we find such a notification system, we'll definitely instruct people how to use it. I don't know if there is or isn't.
You just have to make sure that it is not. It is my understanding. Like, for example, I have mine emails me everything.
Right.
So if you set it up in your settings to
Got it.
notify you, it'll shoot you like an email if you have like a premiere that is going to start in an hour.
Nice. Well, the other thing we can do is we can if we post it to Facebook, Donna, to So Local, the So Local Live Network page, and you have notifications enabled for that, you should get a notification because we are going to link to the YouTube show back to Facebook. So we'll be doing that for the time being as well.
I wish YouTube had like an auto post so that it could just like hit Twitter, all the everything. Anyway, we'll figure it all out. Yeah. So I mean, yep. That's all. I got nothing.
Last questions are in.
I was like, yeah. I mean, are we screwed?
It's that time.
Maybe. I don't know.
Are we personally screwed? Are we going to be bombed by the Iranians? No, we're not. But we're certainly taking a huge beating in world opinion of us. It's probably making it less safe for us to travel anywhere with an American flag pin on.
If I was Iran, I would have had plans to bomb things inside the United States if they start bombing places inside Iran.
Oof, that's terrifying. Not
Because
just,
honestly,
and not because I'm
that's what
personally
I would
afraid,
do.
but that would make things worse.
Right. But also like I keep thinking like what would I do if they came to Canada and started like threatening to invade and yada 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 yada
Right.
yada? Not much different, probably.
I mean, threatening to blow up cultural monuments.
I hope it would be, completely, and probably would be with the three of us would be, trying to get everyone at the table and peacefully protesting or whatever. But I mean, how many people in the United States do we know that would just go fucking get their ARs and start fucking shit up?
Yep.
Lots.
Yeah, I like it this that people that were okay with this. I'm like, how would you feel if they just shot Mike Pence out of the sky? Because that's essentially what we just did. Or like Norman Schwarzkopf.
Schwarzkopf is who I was thinking about this morning. How many hundreds of thousands of people would he be responsible for killing?
Right.
Right. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. Or just needs to calm the fuck down.
Yeah.
Because they're listening to this. Obviously, that's gonna fix everything.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think early, to kind of bring it around, I don't think we can shame the president into changing how he's going to act on this. One of the things we can do is make sure that the next president is someone who will use measured, reasoned responses and diplomacy instead of military power. And I think Obama was sort of a compromise value between those two places. We still were drone striking the shit out of people in the same region we're talking about now and making new terrorists. New freedom fighters, new people that were going to defend their homeland against American imperialism. So maybe we need to start leaning towards a president who's not going to even indulge in that much of that kind of behavior. So.
I definitely do not envy the next president's tasks as far as any of this is concerned.
Yeah. Well, whoever they are, they ought to be a person that is really good at relating to people conversationally and negotiating friendships. That's something we really, really need right now. Yeah. And I think the entire slate of Democratic candidates would be better at that than who we have in the White House currently. So there, I could think of 5 Republicans who would be better at that than the current president, including Mitt Romney. What the hell kind of world am I living in where Mitt Romney is seen as a sane option?
What's interesting? What's interesting? I'm just going to throw this out there. Just going to throw it in there. I finished watching Messiah on Netflix.
Okay.
And I won't ruin anything, but the person who's chosen as sort of the president in the show has a little bit of a
Romneyism, yeah.
reflection going on for them as far as their character is concerned, which, by the way, if anybody needs a binge-watchy kind of thing, it's a whole lot of interesting.
Cool. All right. Well, anyway. I love you very much. Thank you for joining us. Mike Silvestri did ask, are you staying safe? He wanted to make sure that you're doing okay.
I'm in Southeast Asia, so I am safe at this point.
Nice. What a world. Southeast Asia is safe. That's a good thing. All right. Ready to wrap this up, Corey?
Yes, sir.
You know the thing about Sasquatch, right?
I've heard.
Real.
Sasquatch is real.
I love you guys.
Love you too.
All right, we'll see you Wednesday, bright and early, 10 a.m.
Thanks, people.